Ladies and gentlemen, we will be commencing with the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave very shortly. If I could kindly request you to kindly take your seats and settle down. Once again, thank you for joining us here this evening. Good evening, everybody. If I could request all our attendees to settle down, we will be starting with the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave very shortly. We'd like to thank the press corps. If I could request you to kindly step outside the dais circle.
It is time to be confident of our own narrative.
India's perception outside of India is better than India's perception in India.
अभिव्यक्ति की आजादी होनी चाहिए, देश का विरोध नहीं होना चाहिए.
There is a danger of democracy by algorithms.
The philosophers have to step in and decide about red lines. That capacity India has got, that is India 2.0.
Hello, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for joining us here for the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave, proudly brought to you by the India Foundation in association with the WMG Group. I'd like to recount the wisdom of the ages. Ano badraha kratavo yantu kritaha. Now, that's of course, I've recounted this for the dozenth time for many of you who have been very generous and enthusiastic and joined us for the trial sessions. But these lines from the Rig Veda essentially say, let noble ideas come to us from all directions. And isn't this evening essentially all that? A circular stage for ideas to radiate out from our thought leaders, for ideas to radiate in. And the location here in the innovation capital of the country, here in Bengaluru, which has been chosen very, very deliberately to foster the engagement of ideas and hopefully engineer more than a few serendipitous engagements. And to that effect, it's really the roster of our speakers who will be devoting their mind space and time to join us here to build Brand Bharat. Imagine what it takes for India to reach greater heights over the next decade. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening again and welcome. My name is Ashwin Raghunath, and it's my honor and pleasure to welcome on stage our Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman. You can choose your favorite corner, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. We're deeply grateful to Shri Piyush Goyal, who will be addressing us via video conference. He is busy in the Maharashtra elections. Thank you so much, ma'am. I'd now like to welcome on stage our former Civil Aviation Minister, Shri Suresh Prabhu, for the inaugural address. Thank you, everybody. Now, if you are physically able to, I'd like to request you all to kindly stand up for our national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल गंगा हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधितरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे.
Thank you. Could you please take your seats? I would now like to request Shri Suresh Prabhu to deliver the welcome address for the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave. Your microphone is also next to you and you're live, sir. You can start speaking. Yes.
Good evening, friends. And let me welcome you all for this 8th edition of India Foundation's organized program, Ideas Conclave. All earlier editions, many of you must have attended, and you must be wondering why this format. It's a different idea. If you come with ideas, you must also think differently, sit differently, think differently, come out with new outcomes differently. So I really want to welcome you all. Many of you I know have attended several programs of India Foundation. In fact, I was just recollecting, the first time I met you was in India Foundation program, some 25 years ago or 22 years ago. It was Thinkers Meet, so I think we met there. So India Foundation has been a platform which has helped many good causes all over the world. Several programs, flagship programs which are organized from time to time have brought together people from different backgrounds, people who think differently, but they have one thing in common, is to come out with better ideas. And this particular event is focused on ideas. As you all know, good ideas, badly implemented, will be disastrous. And a bad idea, ruthlessly put into place, will be catastrophic. So idea in itself has to be something good, not only good, but also has the ability to implement in the right way. So that's what we are going to discuss in the course of next few days. As you know, this is the country, and I know several of the excellencies who are present here will agree, that this is one place where you come here, you always feel a little bit cool, safe, tranquil. And you can never think about ideas when your mind is not tranquil. If you are living in an atmosphere of volatility, in conflict, you cannot necessarily think in the right mind. And therefore today we are beginning a process of thinking together about several ideas, but ideas focusing on better public good for global good. And there the concept that we have thought about this time is Bharat, the next decade and beyond. And as you know, Bharat itself is an idea which has survived for thousands of years. There were civilizations which are older or contemporary at that time, don't exist today. Look at Incas, one of the most developed civilization at that particular point of time. Maya, it's just not there. But Bharat has survived because of the idea of Bharat survived. There were many people who came here as invaders. They could actually occupy the land, but never could conquer the mind. And that's how the idea of Bharat survived. And that's the idea which we want that to be used for the world to benefit from. And that's what hopefully we'll do in the course of next 3 days. As I said, the world is passing through one of the worst times, at least in recent times. We thought for a long time that wars are a thing of the past. Today it looks like the war all around us. we thought that stability is something that we can take it for granted. But now uncertainty seems to be the order of the day. And at that time, geopolitics, geoeconomics in turmoil, it's a time to really find a way forward, which will actually make the world a better place. And that's why we are here in this Ideas Conclave. I'm very happy that we have a very distinguished person. She's not distinguished only because she's the Finance Minister of India, but also because of her own personal commitment to several good causes. And that's why I said we met first on Thinkers Meet to think together about how to make the world a better place. So I'm very happy that we have her here as kickstart this process of ideas being unveiled. And many of you are here from all around. And we'll not go into circles, right? So we are standing here, but we'll all together, we'll think together and come out with better ideas which will take us forward. So I will stop here and once again welcome all of you on behalf of India Foundation, and let us set a good foundation for the better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We now have a video message from Shri Piyush Goyal, our Minister of Commerce and Industry, who unfortunately couldn't join us because of the elections in Maharashtra. Let's watch.
Good evening. I extend my heartfelt congratulations to the India Foundation for organizing the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave. Today, India stands proud, resilient, and determined on the cusp of an extraordinary transformation. Under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the nation is well on its way to becoming the 3rd largest economy in the world and is prepared to meet global challenges. The Indian rupee has held its position as one of the least volatile among major currencies. Our forex reserves today stand at about $675 billion, amongst the 5 largest in the world. India is committed to promoting sustainable trade practices and green technologies, ensuring that economic growth aligns with environmental responsibility. We have already achieved 200 gigawatt out of the 500 gigawatt target set for 2030. The PM Surya Ghar Free Electricity Scheme aims to cover 1 crore households while creating 17 lakh jobs. Trends, research and innovation remain key pillars in our journey towards Viksit Bharat. To encourage private sector participation in deep tech and sunrise domains, the Government of India has announced a fund of 1 lakh crore rupees, which will provide long-term financing to promote innovation. I urge industries to leverage this fund to scale up innovation in critical areas in public-private mode with academia partnerships. Private capital expenditure plays an essential role in complementing and amplifying government-led investments. As per the Reserve Bank of India, private sector capex is expected to increase by 54% in financial year 2024-25 from the previous year, which reflects the growing business confidence and optimism. When I attended this event in 2018, I spoke about BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goals, and how
beautiful sacred Bodhi tree sapling and went to Sri Lanka. And then from there to Laos, Cambodia and Thailand, not just Sanghamitra but many others afterwards. Would we want that experience to be recalled from the point of view of Buddhist philosophy, which which was given birth in India and which moved further. And today you have flourishing Buddhist community living elsewhere. That's a big brand that you can do. Other than, of course, I'll come to the pain points, which are not going to be pain points, but which have to be challenges undertaken by us. I would think it's important, at least in top 100 tourist centers, without speaking about the challenge, first I would think, top 100 tourist centers, we should have a self-learning program which is digitally run for architecture of that area, of that particular iconic site, the value for tourism there, architecture, Sanskrit, Pali, or any other language which has been identified with that area. If you were to go to, let us say, the Brihadishwara temple in Tanjavur, it would be Tamil. And the script written on the stone edicts are all probably ancient Tamil, with a slightly different script, but also having Pali and Sanskrit in it. And give prior learning material for those who would want to understand those signature Indian architectural marvels, the stone edicts, archaeological valuable remnants which are there, so that a multidisciplinary approach to tourism will showcase India's architectural capabilities, sculptures, and many others, Sanskrit, ancient Pali, Tamil, and many other language, and provide a certificate for those who are particularly interested in archaeology, particularly interested in ancient monuments, stone edicts, and so on. Give them a certificate and provide a digital learning after that. I've just taken 3 examples for the cultural part, but more importantly, the pain point, I will just highlight that. Our temples or our iconic tourist centers will have to be a lot more handled with a perspective that this is where India's image is being projected. We need better servicing, better catering, better tourist guides, better immersive experience which is required. And for that, today's technology being what it is possible to brand through technology a better experience, immersive experience. And I would think in culture, I've just taken a few examples to say, build brand Bharat through these. I'll quickly move on to talking about the achievements of India in digital public infrastructure, the potential that we have in artificial intelligence, in providing knowledge hub, India brand knowledge hub. India means knowledge hub. Can we build a brand of Bharat as the knowledge hub of the world using technology? Whilst of course it's important for us to recall the great scientists, the great eminent people who have contributed for science and knowledge per se. You have great documents, Surya Siddhanta, Brihad Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, and so on. But are they just going to be referred to occasionally? Don't we want people to know what these are? These are brands for ancient India, which we refer to even today. The thought of zero, the number, Aryabhatta, Rishi Kanad, the atomic theory. And also, it's not as if it was just ancient India. It kept continuing over generations after generations. 12th century, you had Bhaskaracharya speaking on Earth's rotation. I was looking at the details. He had arrived at 365.2588 as the time that it takes for Earth to go around the sun. And today's scientific evidences show that the difference between today, what has been arrived, and what was arrived in the 12th century by Bhaskaracharya was just 3.5 minutes difference. And if that is the brand which from ancient India on science and the grasp that Indians have had in higher sciences is we need to brand that continuous intergenerational passing of ideas in science. Today we also have in the last 1 century. You have people continuing with that tradition. C.V. Raman, I'm just counting the Nobel laureates. C.V. Raman, S. Chandrasekhar, J.C. Bose, S.N. Bose, Meghnad Saha, and also mathematician Ramanujan. So I'm giving you a mixed set of names, highlighting how India's strength in science has been, since ancient India, unbroken. Today you find ISRO doing spectacular things about space research, and frugally at that. You have technology companies now capturing the globe on how to use technology-driven services. Biosciences, India's leading in it. Pharma sector, in fact, that is one idea which I would put forward to take as an example. India is setting standards in pharmaceuticals. In fact, I would think the first thing that all of us will have to focus our attention on is you don't need a US FDA standard. You may take it very well. Please do take it, because that helps your exports. But can we in India not have a Bharat FDA, Food and Drugs Administration, which can give global standards of benchmarks? If you reach that benchmark, your pharmaceutical products are going to be good enough or even unsurpassable. So we need to focus on those sort of things. In fact, there for the science, I would like to say, I'll recall the words of Erwin Schrödinger. He says, most of my ideas, a top scientist of his caliber says, most of my ideas and theories were heavily influenced by Vedanta. People outside are willing to recognize that brand of India which dominated in science. We need to continue with it, and brand Bharat should speak for excellence in science and, of course, now technology. Moving to the third, and I'll try to wrap it up so that I don't exceed the time given. The third is India's businesses, and particularly the startups. Our gig economy startups, especially the quick commerce, for instance, are truly one of the kind of innovation that only India has. But that's not to say the brick and mortar retail is not doing fine. They are being challenged. I recognize that. They are being challenged by quick commerce, and we need to handhold and support our brick and mortar retail, no doubt. But use this to brand India as a destination of innovative solutions to modern urban needs. This will serve as an incentive or call to scale up internationally, catapulting Indian enterprise with a strong Bharatiya identity to become some of the biggest players in the international tech business space. That idea which I would put across here, just as I did for pharmaceuticals, if we can have a Bharat FDA, Food and Drug Administration. Let's recall, post-World War, we've had Germany standing for quality, technologically superior quality products. You would immediately say, oh, it's come from Germany, it should be the best. You had such similar approach even for products coming from Japan. I would have that brand for Bharat, which would stand both for technical quality and for ethical quality. It's absolutely important. Ethical quality of every produce produced from India, and for every service that India extends, both for goods and services, we should now stand for not just technical quality, product quality, but also for the ethics which has governed in producing it. Why do I say this? Millennia we've been producing products. There's never been this point of exploitation. And suddenly, for a traditional industry, like let's say carpet making, you had a diktat coming from the buyers in the West. Oh no, you're using children for making these carpets. We won't buy it from you. Silk from South India, from very close to Bangalore, where families are engaged in it without denying children the schooling. But unless that craft is learnt very young, he will never become a master weaver. We've not denied children education, but even if that has got to be proved, we shall prove it. But if you want to have products from India which are master class, you are not going to be told by others, you employ children, you have sweat labor. No, we need to stand up and say, we take care of our children, we take care of their education, we also equally skill them. For a moment, even if it's not music to the ears of many, I would still say, despite my not subscribing to communism as an ideology, what was USSR's singular achievement in terms of skilling people? You would have a gymnast of world class coming from there. You would have a musician who could play Tchaikovsky much better than many of the Europeans who learnt coming from there. You had education which led to science and discovery. You also had chess players topping the world from there. That's the only thing I would recall USSR about. But it showed that possibility that it is training from young that is going to give that specific skill and mastery on that skill by the time the person becomes even a teenager, late teenager. So that capture them, skill them from young for those complex skills which they need is also an important part of branding Bharat. So if you want to have very good quality products, yes, you need to have technical superiority, be it small chips, which are electronic chips, or be it your solar panels, or be it your carpet, or be it your silk. Our Indian silk wouldn't have lost its ground if only the British didn't impose the Manchester machine-made stuff on us. We would have still continued over the generations. But then, these are just some examples which I've said. Similarly, Indian polishing and gems trade is something which globally is recognized. But it was necessary to say, source your raw material from such sources which do not use slave labor, which don't come from monies coming from dirty money, so that blood diamonds were not going to come into India, which is a good step. But those kind of steps which we need to do for our own, for better ethical production, is something which I would value when you build brand Bharat. And the final step, building brand Bharat, is in terms of archives, is in terms of India's poor track record with record keeping is a largely new phenomenon. It wasn't there before. We were very good methodical in maintaining our records. Bharatiya record keeping or sense of history was strong, later infused with the British meticulousness of recording their work or observations of the subcontinent. Can we be revisiting this? Can we revitalize it? I know I will touch on only one sector on this and go to my last point. I think it's Prasar Bharati. I can see representatives of Prasar Bharati here once upon a time. They have started a new streaming service, I'm told. Given the extensive Indian film industry and their successes, the TV, the radio archives that they may have, can their streaming services be bolstered with well-curated podcasts from radio content, for instance, and film and TV collections who don't, which are collector's pride actually. I know All India Radio has some of the best classical musicians who've sung annually and the records are kept there. Paluskar. These are not people you can hear again, but the recordings are available. Can we therefore look at creating India's own movie? Movie, the app for cinephiles who don't want to watch mindless shows in Netflix, but instead of thinking like a cottage industry, for India only that is, the subtitling and other things can be world class to cater to an international audience, so that people who are curious about India get to seeing our wonderful artists perform, good movies being seen. So brand building therefore as Bharat with a rich history of storytelling in various modern media and not just in ancient storytelling form. Even that can be done, but this. The last thought I leave before you all, very thinking, very Bharat-minded audience. Can we reimagine economic systems? And when I say this, let me first put the three assumptions that I make for all the economic systems that prevail. Either expansionism is a feature in them, exploitation is a feature in them, or aggression is a feature in them. For all the three, you have immense number of examples. Expansionism, imperial and mercantile period, which all of us know about. Exploitation, material and human resources being unthinkingly, limitlessly being exploited. Depleted coal, depleted crude, and now possibly depleting lithium ions. So, when you look at aggression, weaponize those which have become common public goods, whether it is vaccine, whether it is any money transferring messages which are internationally used, and my enemy, your enemy, let my neighbor become a beggar, but my policy will be so exploitative and aggressive. These are some of the features that I'm highlighting. Therefore, brand the Indian economic growth model, something which all of us can discuss about and something which we can take in. Features which I look in that, like Honorable Prime Minister says, life, capital L, small I, capital F, capital E. Lifestyle for environment. Change your lifestyle so that you don't demand more electricity. The classic example that Honorable Prime Minister gave. You go in a car which is AC'd to your gym and use electricity for your treadmill there and for many other things, and come back home in the car and then speak for we'll have to be environmentally friendly. Can we instead change our lifestyle? Be more nature friendly? Another, sustainability is inherent to India. So when you're talking of a economic growth model, sustainability being inherent to us, our coastal communities were absolutely nutritively rich because they relied on the fish that they caught. And there was a moment from the West, please just eat those vegetables and fruits which are available within your 100 kilometers radius. That is economically sustainable. Don't ask for sitting here salmons from Scotland. Very well taken. But that was part of India. And most of us ate the food which was available within your immediate neighborhood. We didn't live though like that because of our poverty. We lived like that because that was our lifestyle. That's how we lived. We believed in it. One more feature, and this is repeated by many people. What is our Purushartha defined as? Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Artha and Kama are between the two bookends of Dharma and Moksha. Why? Your Artha, your economic well-being and your businesses, as a family man, the kind of money you earn, the kind of money you spend, have all got to be guided by dharma. Once you miss that out, it can be greed, it can be anything else, you won't care about your neighborhood, you won't care about the exploitative resources that you're using, more than leaving the next generation in debt. So it has to be artha within principles of dharma, it has to be moksha, and that is where karma comes in. And moksha is not some golden terrain or zone which is somewhere above you. It is realizing that you are the divine yourself. Realization. And if you have that realization, you don't need to have people tell you love is the best way, inclusivity is the best way. If you see the divine in every other person, in every other commodity, in every other object, you know where you stand. And therefore, eternal values of life, which is what is dharma, which is according to desha and kala, it is not a fixated, one-time value system. And the self-realization at the end of it guides your artha and kama. So therefore, in contrast to the linear going upwards trajectory, my growth has to be 10x more, 5x more, 25x more. I have to produce more, get the resources from wherever. So we understood this as a cycle. We believed we move with ups and downs in life. That immediately means that you will reuse, recycle. So the cycle influences in everything that you do. Today we hear thoughts and concepts which are coming from abroad. Circular economy. Again, we didn't follow circular economy principles of reuse because we were in poverty. We thought it is our responsibility to use as per our need and not as per our greed. So responsible capitalism is the point which I want to leave as my final word, so that we understand that capitalism also has its limitation, and we need to brand India as a responsible capitalist country which knows to keep its people, with many of its institutions doing their job. And that, I will not elaborate, I'm taking more of your time, is in the book's content. One of the main important point of why nations fail. Spoke about it. Institutions. Institutions and their strength. Unless your institutions are going to reflect these values, you're never going to succeed. So, Why Nations Fail is the book written by Darren Ajmolu and James A. Robinson, published in 2013. So, with that said, for us Indians, I conclude with the words of Tolstoy. I'm not using an Indian's own word for telling us what I have a thought, but I'm using the words of Leo Tolstoy. I'm taking mid-sentence, and I quote, "For there, more than 200 million people, highly gifted, both physically and mentally, find themselves in the power of a small group of people, quite alien to them in thought and unmeasurably inferior to them in religious morality." Unquote. Again, one more line from Tolstoy, which will go together with the line just read. A commercial company enslaved a nation comprising 200 millions. What does it mean that 30,000 men, not athletes, but rather weak and ordinary people, have subdued 200 million vigorous, clever, capable, and freedom-loving people? Do not the figures make it clear that it is not the English? I repeat this sentence. Do not the figures make it clear that it is not the English who have enslaved the Indians. It's not the English who have enslaved the Indians, but the Indians who have enslaved themselves. Thank you.
Sure. It's our absolute delight and honor to have you open the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave. And thank you for reimagining the next decade for India. It now falls upon to us to realize it. Now, for the vote of thanks, I'd like to welcome Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha. Vice Admiral Sinha is the chairman of the Trust Board of the India Foundation. Sir?
Namaskar. On behalf of India Foundation, I am privileged to make a vote of thanks for our Honorable Nirmala Sitharaman ji, the Minister of Finance and Corporate Affairs. She has taken out time to come here, despite the fact that the session of the Parliament starts in 3 days, and there's a lot of homework to be done. So thank you, ma'am, very much. Here in India Foundation, we have made note of points you have made, and I can assure you that we will act on it. I also give my vote of thanks to Sri Suresh Prabhu ji, the chair and former Civil Aviation Minister, for chairing this session and giving his words of wisdom. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. We'd now like to give ma'am a small memento, and to give a memento to our Finance Minister, I'd like to call on stage Jayesh Sangarika, the Group CEO FO of Infosys. Jayesh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jayesh. I'd now like to call Sundaraju, the chairman of the Atria Group and Atria University, to give a memento to Sri Suresh Prabhu. Joining us from there.
Thanks to you, I also got it. Co-benefit.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let's give a round of applause and thanks to Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, our Finance Minister, and to Sri Suresh Prabhu, our former Civil Aviation Minister. We are grateful for sharing.
Yes, please.
We request all of you to remain seated while we take a moment to arrange the stage for our next session. Please stay seated, and please give us a moment.
ladies and gentlemen, may I please request everybody to settle down. We will continue with our program. At the India Ideas Conclave, we always had one very out-of-the-box type of lecture. India's USP has always been its spiritual wisdom and knowledge. You talk on any subject, there is something very, very essentially Indian, spiritual, to offer as a very distinct and unique idea. Continuing with that practice, we wanted to have, in the midst of many experts, economists, scholars and all, we wanted to have one speaker who will offer us a very distinctly Indian perspective on Bharat. And interestingly, we found an American to do that job. And that is a very distinguished scholar of Vedas, a Vedic scholar, a renowned Yogacharya, one who has written a good number of books on India's spiritual knowledge, wisdom, and many different aspects of it. And one who has been honored by our Honorable President of India twice, once with the award of Padma Shri, and the second time with the higher award of Padma Bhushan. That is Dr. David Frawley, popularly known as Pandit Vamdev Shastri. I invite Pandit Vamdev Shastri to deliver his talk on the theme of the conference.
And are we hearing me okay? Okay, great. And I first want to thank Ram Madhav for inviting me. It is quite, as we say, more than an honor. And I have watched his work on every great work he's done in many fields, culminating in the India Foundation. And I would say this is the premier organization for dealing with knowledge, culture, all aspects that are relevant to India, Bharat, and the world today, whether it is economics, whether it is geopolitical, whether it is educational, whether it is spiritual, whether it is all that is happening in the world, and specifically all that is Bharat. And I would like to say that India Foundation is the Bharat today. India Foundation is the brand Bharat. And India Foundation is carrying brand Bharat to the world. And that is very essential today. Bharat, as we say, is a civilization, a culture, a land, a nation, but it is also a cosmic reality, we would also say. In fact, you can find this Bharatam Janam, the people, the land of Bharat, in the oldest Rig Vedic verses. And Bharat is the oldest nation in the world. It is also the most enduring nation in the world. And it is one that is not just there as a political entity or as boundaries. It's one that has a spiritual vision. And the vision that Bharat has, it's carrying the Atma Vidya, the knowledge of the true self, the Brahma Vidya, the knowledge of the cosmic reality, the supreme being, Satchidananda, for the benefit of all humanity and all creatures. It is not just simply a human country, and it's not simply a religious country, it is part of the cosmic reality. Bharat means carrying. And what does Bharat carry? Bharat carries Agni, but that Agni is the flame of consciousness, the flame of the Atma Vidya that dwells within each one of us, and that is also the supreme reality of the universe. Now, Bharat has always been a knowledge-based civilization, dharmic civilization, and it has recognized knowledge on all of its levels. Even in Upanishads, they also recognize the importance of architecture, art, music, medicine, mathematics, and science, every possible form of knowledge and culture. But they say that the Atma Vidya, the self-knowledge, is the basis of all true knowledge and the supreme knowledge. They say there's two types of knowledge. There is the lower knowledge by which name, form, and number is known. Then there is the higher knowledge by which the eternal, the infinite, the self, the immeasurable is known. And both forms of knowledge have been honored in Bharat, but it gives the higher place to that Atma Vidya. And Bharat is extremely important today because of the crisis going on in the world. Right now, the world is lacking in leadership. To a great extent, the world is lacking in diplomacy. We can certainly see that. Technology is growing, but technology, Yogananda wrote in a book some time ago, he said that the problem with science, with the scientific age, is that science is a two-edged sword, and it can be easily weaponized. And so, the very things that are helping us can also threaten us. And unless we have that Atma Vidya, or sense of the divine within all nature, all universe, and within each one of us, then we tend to get caught in the human ego. And what happens today now is that a small group of people can be given tremendous amount of power because of a very powerful technology. But really that technology should be used for the benefit of all. And we have to remember that the outer knowledge makes the outer world better, but unless we make our inner consciousness better, then the outer factors can limit us and bring us into conflict, difficulty, and also duality. Now, the Bharat as a knowledge-based civilization also is very much concerned with education, and this is a very important thing for us to understand. Education is not just the information that we are giving to the children, but are we teaching them how to learn? Are we teaching them how to learn for themselves and how to know themselves and how to connect to nature, all of life, and respect it? All life is sacred. Now, there is a lot of benefits with the technology. The technology has to go forward. And it's very interesting to note that today, India is the country that has the largest amount of high-tech scientists, specialists. We see them in Silicon Valley, in the United States. And yet, it remains the country that holds the Atma Vidya, the eternal transcendent knowledge, knowledge of the true self, the infinite, or also what we call the science of consciousness. You know, it's one thing to know outer things, very important, but if you don't have a science of consciousness, you do not know the essence of reality. It's very interesting. We go back to the Upanishads, which explain all the different forms of knowledge. And they make some fundamental questions. By what can the knower be known? Many of us practice yoga. You know, yoga is a great teaching, but yoga begins with, we need to, they say, chitta vritti nirodha. You need to calm, silence, and empty the mind so that you have the perception, or you go back to the state of the seer, the purusha, the drashta, the seeing, the knower. So they're asking questions. In fact, every question is asked, and the most important question is always, who am I? And for most of us, of course, we identify ourselves by the body, by the mind, by what we own, by where we live, by some name or form. But in the knowledge system of Bharat, we do that inquiry into the Atma, or the true self. Who are we? Who am I? What in me is able to transcend death? What is aware, even in the state of deep sleep? What transcends within us time, space, name, form, and number? In that regard, your consciousness is always there. But we look without to the outside, and we forget the consciousness and the being that we are, and we get caught in the outer differences, which eventually end up in conflict and struggle. So Bharat is carrying that great Atmic knowledge, self-knowledge for humanity. The Greeks also asked the question, who am I? But they didn't quite understand the Atma. They were still caught, we might say, in simply the intellect. Now, in these India Ideas Conclaves, they often brought in Swami Dayananda Saraswati of Arshavidya. He was one of our teachers as well. And he always raised these particular ideas for us. That is the Vedanta. And the Indian system of ethics is what we call the dharmic principles, not simply something man-made or from the outside. He used to say, you do not want to be harmed. No other living being wants to be harmed. So respecting the law and the consciousness of the universe, we do not harm anyone. It is not an imposition from the outside. Then, in this respect, in the Bharatiya tradition, the universe is not just something that you can look at scientifically. It is an art as well as a science. Nothing in nature is precisely mathematically correct. The day is not exactly 24 hours. The year is not exactly 360 days. There's this deeper creative dimension, and the entire universe is one being. That is the Bharatiya view. Oneself in all beings, and the universe as one conscious being and one family. And that is what we need today. We live in a universe that is one, but we forget, and we end up struggling and fighting with each other. The Earth is such a beautiful planet. We should be happy just to be here, you know, just to watch the sunrise, to look at the stars, to see the clouds, the rain. But what do? We fight and struggle with each other. We want more things than our neighbor has, and we forget that the true happiness and well-being is within. Now, another very important gift of Bharat to the world is the temple. And you can see there are many great temples. I came to you today from Varanasi, and we had been to Kashi Vishwanath, and of course the different temples there. And prior to that, in Delhi, we went back to the Akshardham, the Swami Narayan temple. I had helped them when it was done 20 years ago with their boat ride down the Saraswati River. They recently have also built a temple in Abu Dhabi, and the royal family of Abu Dhabi attended all the rituals and participated in all the events going on. And they have just also completed a temple in the United States in New Jersey that's over 200 feet high, all hand-carved with the most exquisite sculpture in the high-quality stone, mainly marble, but other factors brought together as well. And in the Vedic view, the Bharat view, the universe creation arises from Ananda. It arises from what people translate as bliss, love, creativity. It's not something that is based upon negativity. That Ananda is also our true nature. So Bharat should be understood relative to the Vedanta, oneself and all beings, but also understand that there is a divine presence in every form, object, creature that reflects the universe as a whole. We're not worshiping one deity as opposed to another. We're recognized that the sacred divine presence is in all and should be shared with all. And also, you see, in the Bharatiya tradition, you have the most festivals. Navaratri, 9 days. Diwali goes on for some days and so forth. So that that whole nature of life should be worship, honoring, respecting, and honoring being part of the oneness. So I'm very happy to be at this important event. Please support the India Foundation, but also follow the India Foundation. And let us take this message of Bharat to the world, because Bharat is also all humanity. We are all part of that same self and being, and let us honor that socially, economically, politically. All the other problems will go away. Hari Om.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pandit Vamdev Shastri, that was Dr. David Frawley. Dr. Frawley, we have a small memento for you, and if you could just join us back on the stage for a quick moment, please. And to give away this memento, I'd like to call on stage the CFO of IBM India, Tejaswini Rajwade. Just wait. Pandit Vamdev Shastri for all of us here at the 8th edition of the India Ideas Conclave, and a big thank you to Tejaswini Rajwade. Panditji, it's our delight and honor for you having joined us here as part of the India Ideas Conclave. Now, our conference keynote session is scheduled to begin in exactly 5 minutes. This will be chaired by Suman, Bery, the Vice Chair of the Niti Aayog, and will feature Shri Neelkanth Mishra from the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, and Shri Manish Sabarwal, the Vice Chairman of Team Lease Services. Once again, this session, which is the conference keynote, will begin in 4 minutes. Mr. Tripathi, how do you do? Can you help me with something? Our conference keynote will start exactly in 2 minutes. If I could kindly request all of you to remain seated. Our conference keynote is starting in 2 minutes and will feature Shri Suman, Bery, Shri Neelkanth, Mishra and Shri Mani Sabharwal. And I assure you this is going to be an incredibly enriching session. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we are commencing with our conference keynote session. If I could kindly request all of you to remain seated and take your seats. It did. Have 10 seconds. Well, it's always a delight to be on time. It's 7:30 and it's time for our conference keynote session. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome on stage our Vice Chair of the Niti Aayog, Shri Suman Bery. Joining Shri Bery from the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Chairperson part-time of the UIDAI, Chief Economist of Axis Bank, MD and Head of Global Research of Axis Capital, Shri Neelkanth Mishra, and the Vice Chairman of Teamly Services, Shri Mani Sabharwal. Gentlemen, it's our delight to host you here at the India Ideas Conclave. Shri Bery, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. My gratitude to the India Foundation for including me amongst the illustrious speakers at the session. It's my first time. Many of you know of the link between Donald Trump and the World Wrestling Federation. I feel a little bit as though that's what we are. And in particular, I don't appreciate having my back to a sizable part of the audience, but c'est la vie. So I guess the immediacy of the set. So let me compliment you. I think my co-panelists, I'm really the chair, have already been introduced, but it's a great pleasure to be with them because they are both people I've known for a long time and both contribute significantly to public discourse. I want to start though by complimenting WF and the India Foundation for choosing a theme or a title which is suitably ambiguous. Building Brand Bharat, India's next decade. And that can take the discussion in a number of directions. I'm just going to kick off with some of the thoughts. I have to say that much of what I was wanting to say was scooped by Honorable FM and a very deep presentation, but nonetheless, I'll press on. And then my colleagues have asked for about 10 minutes each to give their perspective. There's no right or wrong about this, but, and then I'll try and moderate a discussion and leave time for questions and answers. So I think a place to start is deconstructing building brand Bharat. And a question that arises, who is to do the building? Okay, so is this the society as a whole? Is this a more specialized communications kind of task? I say this because, frankly, when I worked for Shell in the Netherlands, the relentlessness of the Dutch brand, tulips and windmills, etc., it was in your face all the time. So people spend a lot of money and effort in defining a national brand. I mean, so is that what we're talking about? I don't think so. But I then go to the word brand. I think Honorable Finance Minister had in mind that brands are really for the rest of the world. Incredible India, God's own country, etc. But, you know, being privileged to listen, to see Honorable PM in many settings, he actually, I think, thinks that this brand is to be defined not only by Indians, but by Indian youth. So are we seeking values and a brand that resonate with India and Indians themselves? And if so, in what context? And I would say that brands are partly about values, and certainly, and this has come up already in what FM had to say about Tolstoy, I mean, I think he is very focused on the importance of self-confidence as part of the India brand today, the next decade, and through Viksit Bharat. And that then leads to the question in my mind of what are, or how has the perception of the Indian brand evolved, and where is it now? So I think spirituality has always been a part of the Indian brand, but I think that was to some extent associated with unassertiveness. And I think that what has happened over the last decade with India's achievements, with India's demographic outcome, is that people are seeing a different side of India. Assertive, but I hope not threatening. And so I think thinking about what the core values are that we want to capture in the brand, this is slightly abstract, but that's what I was moved to think about by the title. And then we made a conscious shift, and we understand why, in moving from India to Bharat. I think that was most visibly advertised at the time of the G20, although there were elements of it before. And so I don't think that needs a lot of explication domestically, but you know, we should recognize that what was talked about both by FM and by the previous speaker, that these are, as it were, attributes that are not necessarily associated with, are not necessary, they don't have immediate associations in people's minds. So, my questions then to my, my fellow panelists is that, is building the India brand a process? What should be the elements of that process? Those of you in particular, how is the India brand seen at the moment? And how self-conscious do we need to be about building the brand? So let me give you the word first, Neelkanth, and I'll keep you to about 10 minutes.
Thank you, Suman, and thank you, India Foundation and WMG to invite me to speak at this August forum. You know, India is many things to many people. We can, I think, divide it, and you put it very wonderfully, into what India or Bharat is to the world outside, and what is it to Indians. Because Indians are a sixth of humanity, so it does matter what Indians think of themselves. For the world outside, again, there is significant diversity. So the way an Indian or a multinational CEO would think in say the US or in the Bay Area would be very different from the common man on the streets of Europe and how they would perceive of India, or say a Chinese would see India, and there would be significant diversity. And I think the framing of the question towards the end that you had of, is there something deliberate about it, or are brands built, especially country brands, built automatically? And I think so far, whatever has happened has been, I would say, endogenous, or it has just happened. No one has designed it or wanted it to happen in a certain way. And we have built a very good and strong brand in certain areas. So for example, take IT. You go anywhere in the world and you want to find an IT solution, and we are sitting right in the middle of Bangalore, and India comes up. I mean, it comes up and it has evolved. It has gone from just doing Y2K to some doing high-tech stuff. But if you want good quality solutions at scale, you go to India. If you are a buyer of pharmaceuticals in the US, the fact that nearly half by volume of all drugs manufactured or sold in the US are manufactured in India is very well known. The FDA has large offices in India to supervise Indian factories. There is an element of trust, so it's not just about our ability to manufacture drugs or to write high levels of code. It is also about trust. No one is afraid to share IP with India. So, people have increasingly become cautious about separating their networks from their China offices. The venture capitalists don't share their data on their prospects with the Chinese counterparts, the same partners. In India, we are seeing an acceleration in the setup of global capability centers, the cutting edge of car design, the cutting edge of chip design. All of that is starting to happen in India, and that means that there is a very deep level of trust. Now, I don't know how much of that comes from the fact that many Indians are CEOs in the US, but this has all happened, and so the brand of India already stands for these things. But it has all come from consistent performance, meaning that starting from just doing bare grunt work and changing the 2-digit year number to the 4-digit year number to it has come from consistent delivery, consistent innovation in processes. And the best example of that is what has happened to our inclusion in the global bond indices. So we kept for a while, at least economists like me, I'm aware, policymakers, almost pleading to the rating agencies that, we need a rating upgrade. And the rating upgrade was required so that global flows could happen and our cost of capital comes down. But the rating upgrade never came. However, we are now part of the global bond indices, and we are starting to get, so the rating agencies are behind the curve, and this has happened because through focus on macroeconomic stability, we have become very attractive to global bond investors. So in fact, the investors pressured the index providers that India should be included, and so to hell with the rating agencies. And that's what I think are core to the brand of a country. So brand Bharat, I think standing for prudence, standing for long-term planning, long-term execution, stability. And I think that the respect with which the financial markets are now treating India has all come from relentless pursuit of stability and self-discipline. But as we think about the next 10 years, next 20 years, next 30 years,
We're enjoined to think about the next decade.
Yes.
Okay, so next decade.
Next decade. You know, the brands are never constant. Brands keep changing. There's a changing context. You know, Samsung started as a grocery trader. It is now the most cutting-edge semiconductor manufacturer in the world, along with TSMC. So companies change, countries change. The context in which we operate today is very different from the context in which we operated 30 years back. And as we think about the brand for outsiders, we need to bring in new characteristics into it. We need to be seen as innovative. We need to be seen as people who can develop products. So it's not just that 1/5 of all chip design engineers are based in India. It is that how many chips are being designed, how many chip design companies are now India-based. And I think that transition is absolutely critical if we have to not get stuck in the middle income trap. I think it's also important that we widen the reach of the brand. So from just being aware, having the CEOs aware that 1,000 or 20,000 or 50,000 of their workers are in India, to the average citizen engaging with Indian brands, Indian products, and becoming familiar with the quality that India stands for. Because I think that in the next 20 years, there is a significant opportunity in Indian workers working abroad. So as much as it is about global capability centers being set up in India, which required proof of no lack of IP theft, stable delivery, even during COVID, things were working, that consistency of performance. But as we think about 20-25% of our incremental workers every year becoming plumbers in Germany, nurses in the UK, farmers in Italy, it becomes very important that the average citizen in these countries starts to think favorably about India, sees us as rule followers, sees us as good people, sees us as people that they would like to work with. And that's where I think our brand extensions, I think, need to happen.
Could I use that as a jump-off point? So Neelkanth has set you up, Manish, in talking about jobs and workers. I have to say that the kind of picture that he paints is not the kind of picture that you would, or is not the kind of narrative that you pick up in the FT or you pick up in the New York Times, which is, massive unemployment and insufficient jobs, etc. You do this stuff for a living. So first, if you could begin with what you know code, which is really what is the nature of the jobs challenge as a part of the image of India. And then there are certain other points that Neelkanth made that I'd like to engage you on.
Yeah. So I think obviously brands in my mind are, for companies and products, are very different for cities and countries. Bangalore has a better brand than Bombay or Delhi, obviously, globally, I would say that. But obviously, I think what we think of ourselves is very different often from what others think of you. And I think, for me, the first gap between what we thought of ourselves and what others thought of us was really when I landed in the US in August '94 for my MBA. There was a front page article on the Wall Street Journal which said that India is more interesting than important. I hope that journalist is eating the newspaper on which she wrote that, because 2 weeks ago I was in Minneapolis and there was this Midwestern white lady, nice lady, checking me in, and she was having trouble with the computer system, and she said, "Why don't you Indians send more software programmers and fix our computer systems?" Now, that would fry most economists' brains that a country with $2,500 per capita income would export more software than Saudi Arabia did oil in 2021. You wouldn't think of a labor market which had 5 million people writing software and getting $250 billion. So I think the notion of every American eating 5 tablets made in India, there are 200 billion generic tablets consumed by Americans every year. year, which means the average American has 5 made in India medicines. We may not make in India machines, we may not make textiles, but we do give 5 medicines to every American. So I think looking forward, and I'll come to the labor market question because I have that framed in my brand, I think we need 3 things in the India brand. We need to be strong, we need to be democratic, and we need to be modern. We haven't been always all these 3 things, right? We need to be strong. Ramdhari Singh Dinkar, my favorite poet, whom I always quote, says, Shama Shobh Piyush Bhujan ko jiske paas garal ho. Only the strong can be kind, benevolent, and generous. So I think we need to be strong. I think we need to be democratic. I think Pakistan and India born on the same night have had different destinies because 3 million people win an election, 21 million people stand for an election. Iqbal, who is the national poet of Pakistan, used to say, Jamhuriyat ek tarz-e-hukumat hai, jisme logon ko gina jata hai, tola nahi. He was lamenting that people are counted, not weighed. And that may explain Pakistan's, sort of instinct to weigh people rather than count them. But I think we have a strong democratic brand. But there are other people here who can talk more about strength, soft power and hard power. There are other people more capable of talking about democracy. But I'd like to spend my time on modernity because that's an important part and the third leg that I think has to be for the India brand. I think we need a modern economy. Fundamentally, we need to be more urbanized, more financialized, more formalized, more industrialized, and better human capital. I mean, finally, there's no such thing as poor people. They are people in poor places. Which state you live in, which city you live in, which sector you work for, which company you work for, and which skill you have really decides your prosperity in India. We've done mass democracy. We didn't do mass prosperity. And I think that was because we didn't have a modern economy. I think we need a modern society, which is meritocracy. IPL has made cricket more meritocratic, which Ranji Trophy didn't do. Streaming platforms have made movies more meritocratic, which Bollywood didn't do. I think private equity has made business more meritocratic, which the traditional licensed Raj didn't do. So I think a society which is modern obviously has the meritocracy angle. So the infrastructure of opportunity, which is what someone referred to, is the infrastructure of opportunity of the 3 E's of education, employment, and employability, which I'm covering in society, not in the economy, because I think India doesn't have a jobs problem, we have a wages problem, and that will come by improving productivity. But in a society, this question of infrastructure of opportunity is a little bit on a dent on the India brand. I think in politics, we need to have modernity too, right? We need to be good ancestors. And I think Neelkanth knows this more than I, that, sort of being a good ancestor, a modern state, as the FM also mentioned, is a welfare state. We are not going to have Ronald Reagan and Thatcher kind of modern markets, but we do need competitive markets, but we also need to think of the welfare state. The question is, do you finance the welfare state with taxes or do you finance it with debt? And I think we have to finance our welfare state with taxes rather than debt. So that I think the long-term thinking, I grew up in Kashmir, they distinguish between amanat and jagir, and I think we have to think of it as amanat, which has to be handed over to the next generation, rather than jagir with what you can do what the hell you want with it, you can steal from your children or grandchildren, like many state governments are doing right now. But I think the fiscal prudence that we demonstrated through COVID, and in a world where there are no fiscal conservatives left, the one thing you do here a little bit is that India has been fiscally prudent, and I think that's an important part of modernity. I mean, the quick ones on business, obviously we have to be modern business. When the licensed Raj ended in 1991, many people told me that India will become like the Wimbledon. It's played in England, but no Britisher ever wins. So multinationals will take over India. In my mind, multinationals are the new PSUs, and maybe that's giving PSUs a bad name. From my perspective, Indian entrepreneurs have finally learned to distinguish between our shareholder role, our board member role, and our chief executive role. And that's really unleashing Indian companies in ways that you couldn't do in the past. So in sort of thinking about the India brand, my favorite book about China is a book called Wealth and Power by Orville and Schell, where he says the 15 most important thinkers in the last 500 years have focused on wealth and power. If you wrote that book about India, you wouldn't title it Wealth and Power. Now, what would you title it is really interesting. Would you title it balance? Would you title it patience? Would you title it tolerance? Would you title it teamwork? I don't know. But I think in my mind, the two challenges with the India brand, which we do need to address as we think about Bharat, is really execution and is really thinking about teamwork. I think, the private sector has a trust deficit, the government has an execution deficit, non-profits have a scale deficit. So if we don't, India is poor because all three of us have our own swim lanes, but we haven't learned to work together in ways that we should have. And the other is execution. We do tend to get a reputation of talking more than we do. This is changing in the last 5, 10, 15 years. But, my dad wore a uniform, and one plaque he always carried was a quote by Thucydides in the Peloponnesian War. He said, any army that has too much of a gap between its thinkers and doers will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools. Right? I think we have to recognize that to reduce that gap between thinking and doing is probably the last mile of the India brand. I think we're getting a brand for being democratic. We are getting a brand for being strong now. We do have to get a brand for being modern, and that really depends on transforming the economy away from 45% of our people working on farms. The answer to Suman's question on why people are worried about jobs is, of course, the stock of jobs since 1947 is a problem. But the flow of jobs since 1991 is a problem. China has moved 300 million people in the same period from farm to non-farm employment. So I think if we want to be a modern economy, if we want to be a modern country, which I think we do, democracy, modernism, and strength will be the three pillars of the brand.
Okay, but do you have a view, and I want to pick up on some of the points there, do you have a view on whether the concept of a brand is useful, and is it useful to align, as it were, an agenda for the next decade? So where does building brand, where does the brand element enter into it?
Brands
so, make America great again. Okay, right. So it's not a brand, it's a slogan, but yeah. So I just wanted to know, are we doing this for the rest of the world, or are we doing this for ourselves?
I think we're doing it for both. I think confidence is the biggest thing in Indians that has changed over the last 10 years. But I do think we have to sell ourselves. There are 211 members of the United Nations. Obviously, 50% of India's foreign direct investment since 1947 came in the last 5 years. But we do need a lot more capital. We do need a lot more technology. We do need a lot more engagement, in addition to becoming stronger ourselves. So I think brands are heuristics. Every chief executive is a chief revenue officer, you're a chief sales officer, because branding and marketing and sales are really important for any organization. So I do think we obviously have to get stronger ourselves, but the world has to recognize our inner strength. So I think there is a value in sort of spending some time on thinking. If your marketing is 5 steps ahead of your product, then you have a problem. Your marketing can be 2 steps ahead of your product, or 1 step, and you can sort of fit into it. So my sense is, yes, I think it is a worthwhile project to think about identity, brands, and I think modernity, democracy, and are powerful inherently in India that we don't have to work on.
And I'll just add to that, and I think the point Manish makes is very important, that look at semiconductors. So 2 years back, when we had this 50% capex subsidy for fabs, I'm part of this committee that has to see the proposals, they made me cry. And here we are giving 50% capex subsidy to any company that has a decent plan. On top of that, state governments are giving 20, 25, some are now giving 30%. And this is the quality of proposals that we get. Today, courtesy the hard work done by the India Semiconductor Mission, the minister, the bureaucrats, we had a semiconductor executive summit on 10th of September. 100 CXOs from the leading global semiconductor companies, equipment companies, manufacturers, materials companies, design companies, They were all in one room and they all looked at each other and said, look what, I mean, forget what the people are saying, I am in the right place. And I think that's where branding helps. That this ecosystem creation would not have been possible if we had just kept lamenting the fact that we have no footprint in semiconductors. To actually put money to work, focus. In fact, some of the people at ISM, the India Semiconductor Mission, I think understand the org structures of global semiconductor majors better than the people in those organizations themselves. There's a lot of hard work that has gone in, that this time is different, we mean business, and once you build that brand, you see the value.
Okay, let me start with some of the positives and then turn to some of the work to be done. So you raised, and will be at the level of abstraction, you raised two values, quality and trust, okay? I would add to that consistency.
Yes.
I think all of us traveled to Singapore, and I was there earlier this year, and I asked the EDB, the Economic Development Board, which has been a power behind Singapore. So how do you sell Singapore? And they said, we don't sell ourselves as very innovative or whatever, but we deliver on our promises, okay? So let me go to all three of those, because Manish talked about execution. So Manish, let me start perhaps with quality. Why is it that in certain spheres, IT, we've been able to, maybe even medicine, establish a reputation for quality, but in certain parts of manufacturing we haven't? What is the quality mindset, and how is it that Japan went, do you think, from being associated with shoddy products in the 50s to made in Japan? Any reflections on this, and what does it mean for the next decade?
Neelkanth was just talking about this, so maybe you can start.
So I think what happened in IT, because we were, it was a heads and hands business, and there were no other places where you could get so many heads and hands, and we had some visionary leaders, many of them from Bangalore, who managed to convert the raw material churned out by engineering institutes using process technology and deliver, right? So CMM level 5, 5I, whatever. And unfortunately on the manufacturing side, the best practices are so far away, because the software was developing, growing at that time. And software services was a very new development. See, the PCs didn't exist pretty much at scale till the late 90s, till the late 80s. But when you are getting into, say, shoe manufacturing, Nike sells 500 million shoes. The Indian shoe manufacturers, work with 5 lines, 10 lines, 20 lines. When a Chinese shoe manufacturer comes in, it is 200 lines. You start doing a production-linked incentive scheme. You know why the shoe PLI failed? It was because the industry said, in plain simple Hindi, kaddu katega, sab mein batega, right? That everyone will get 20 crores. No one wants to buy that. You have to give 5 people 200 crores if you meet a certain target. And we missed on that. But anyway, thankfully, like Tamil Nadu has now 5 of the top 10 shoe manufacturers in the world, non-Indian, being given 100, 200 acres of land, 6 to 8 hours of connectivity from the port, and they are coming in. The moment they come in, they bring in expertise, they bring in value chains, they bring in, again, trust that India can deliver. And I think on the manufacturing side, that's where we have slipped. The sooner we can correct for that, I think the better it will be for our growth, because clearly it is still sporadic. It is only TN which has solved that. I think UP needs to solve that.
If I can add to software, it's the most real-time people supply chain there is. You know, we had 4 lakh engineers in 2000. At the peak in 2013, we went to 19 lakhs. Then there was a slowdown. We went back to 11 lakhs. Now we're back up to 15 lakhs. There are very few people supply chains in India that are so real-time. We produce more engineers than China and the US, and you can say, oh, an Indian engineer is not the same. It doesn't matter. For you, the software industry only needs 2.5 or 4 lakhs out of those 13 lakhs, so they get to pick one. They have to only kiss 4 frogs to find one princess. But manufacturing, I would submit the 40 factory refugees, or maybe there are 50 of them now, who are now looking to leave China. They think infrastructure, skills, and finance are a thorn in the flesh. They're no longer a dagger in the heart. It used to be a dagger in the heart, infrastructure, and as he's saying, it's much better. I think skills, you know, you've been able to staff up in electronic manufacturing because you need repair. And we were dancing with this ghost, oh, to make an iPhone, you need 1 year of training. You actually need only 8 weeks of training to start making an iPhone, so that's repair is happening. But the biggest problem with manufacturing, at least in my mind that I hear, is still the regulatory cholesterol. That is the one consistent brand issue we have, where global boards dance with this ghost that, oh, India is a really difficult place to do business, there's retrospective taxation, that there's 700 ways to go to jail in the Factories Act. Some of this is true, some of this is not true. So I think the
and
last...
So what does that mean for branding? I mean, how do we change that perception? You can't change the perception without changing something. Yes. What do we need to change that perception?
We need to cut the regulatory cholesterol, and now 75% of it is in states. There's 25% still left at the center, which we should set because that should become a demonstration. But, you know, 29 chief ministers clearly matter more than one prime minister. When people are choosing electronic manufacturing destinations, as currently many of them are, they're not choosing India, they've already decided. They're choosing Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Karnataka, or a state. So I think increasingly, we will, just like software, Bangalore may have a better brand in software than many other places. I think for manufacturing, Tamil Nadu right now has an unbeatable brand. I mean, every factory refugee I know is looking at Tamil Nadu, while Maharashtra has lost some of the sheep.
Do you agree with that? I mean, we're here to discuss the India brand. Is it the aggregate of individual state brands, or I can see that states can spoil our brand, but where do you go with Manisha's comment that, look,
so on both
there's so much diversity? And look, by the way, as somebody who was working in Europe last decade, you know, as I move around India, I think of each state as basically a country in the EU, okay? So, you know, if you were to ask me, how do you build the EU's brand, I would say, forget about it, you know? And yet that's the aggregate that we're talking about right now. But please continue.
No, but there is an India level problem as well. I mean, so to add to what Manish was saying, and now it's been, I mean, a lot of water has flowed under the bridge, so I think it's okay to talk about it. Like, one of the biggest semiconductor manufacturers, at a time when we are struggling to get decent proposals, in October 2022 says, I want to spend $3 billion on a capex and give us half of that.